Everybody, today Honey is going to continue reading Wayside School Gets a Little Stranger, written by Louis Tracker and illustrated by Tim Houch. Chapter 10 Mr. Gorf. Mr. Gorf, muttered Joy as she walked down the stairs to recess. Did she say Mr. Gorf? Mauricia nodded. Leslie caught up to them. Did she say Mr. Gorf? I think so, said Mauricia. Do you think? Leslie asked. I don't know, said Mauricia. I hope not, said Joy. Before Mrs. Jules ever came to Wayside School, the children had a teacher named Mrs. Gorf. She wasn't very nice. Even Myron was very worried. And Myron had never gotten in trouble in his whole life. Mr. Gorf might be a good teacher, said Eric Bacon. Just because he has the same last name as Mrs. Gorf doesn't mean he'll be horrible. That's right, said Eric Ovens. People with the same name can be different. I agree, said Eric Fry. There are probably lots of people named Gorf, Damien said hopefully. I bet if you looked at the phone book, you'd find 10 whole pages of Gorf. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not coming to school tomorrow, said Joy. Me neither, Maricia agreed. But the next morning their parents made them all go to school. Everyone arrived on time. Nobody dared to be late. But there was no teacher. Dee Dee sat down next to Myron. Is he here? She whispered. Shh, whispered Myron. He folded his hands on his desk and stared straight ahead. One by one, the children entered the classroom and quietly sat down at their desks. They couldn't take any chances. Mr. Gorf might walk through the door any moment. Or maybe he was already there, hiding in the coat closet, just waiting for someone to do something wrong. I didn't want to come today, whispered Calvin, but my parents made me. Shh, said Bibi. He might hear you. Mr. Kidwater's voice came over the PA system. Good morning, boys and girls. Good morning, Mr. Kidwater. All the children all answered together, like good little boys and girls. They listened attentively to their principal. Then, when Mr. Kidwater was finished, they took out their arithmetic books and started working. After that, they did social studies, reading, and spelling. When the recess bell rang, the children put their books neatly in their desks, quietly lined up, then walked out of the room and down the stairs. So, how's your substitute teacher? Asked Louis, out on the playground. Tough, said Phoebe. I've never worked so hard in my life. I did more work before 10 o'clock than most people do in a day, said Calvin. But he's very fair, Myron quickly added, just in case Mr. Gorf was listening. He might have been hiding in the bushes. Yes, he's nice and fair and a very good teacher, said Jenny. Very smart too, said Dee Dee. We're lucky to have him. Louis twisted the end of his mustache between his fingers. After recess, the children returned to class and worked until lunchtime. At lunch, they all ate all the food Miss Mush served them. Their manners were perfect. Mr. Gorf might have been hiding under the table. After lunch, they returned to class and practiced their handwriting. Myron looked around. All of a sudden, he got a terrible urge to do something. Anything. Ooga booga, he said. Jenny put her finger to her lips. Biff, boff, boof, said Myron, a little louder. Shh, said Jenny. Myron stood up. No, he shouted. I don't have to be quiet. Everyone tried to get Myron to hush up. Myron climbed on top of his desk. Look around, Fox. There's no teacher. We're doing all this work for nothing. Get down, whispered Allison. Do you want to get us all in trouble? Myron jumped on top of Allison's desk. Hi, Allison, he said. Then he hopped over to Dee Dee's desk, then Ron's, then Mauricia's. Please, Myron, said Mauricia. This is fun, said Myron. He made a good leap and landed on top of the teacher's desk. Mrs. Jules always kept a coffee can full of Tootsie Roll Pops on her desk. It was still there. Hey, anyone want a Tootsie Roll Pop? Asked Myron. Everyone stared at him. Myron took one for himself. He sat in the teacher's chairs. with his feet up in the teacher's desk and sucked on it. Please stop, Myron, begged Jenny. What if he's hiding in the closet? Get real, said Myron. Why would he hide in the closet? What if Mr. Gorf was married to Mrs. Gorf? Asked Allison. Myron laughed. Who would ever want to marry Mrs. Gorf? He asked. Somebody had to marry her, said Rondi, or else she wouldn't be a Mrs. What if he loved her very much? Asked Allison. And then one day she didn't come home from work. Then he never saw her again. Then he didn't know what happened to her. But he knew he used to teach this class. So he might be hiding in the closet to try find out we're the ones who got rid of her. If I was married to Mrs. Garth, said Jason, I'd be glad she never came home. He should thank us. Nice going, Jason, said Jenny. If he is hiding in the closet, you just told him we're the ones who got rid of his wife. Well, if I didn't, you just did, said Jason. It doesn't matter, shouted Myron, because Mr. Gorf is not hiding in the closet. Myron ran to the back of the room and opened the closet door. A man stepped out. Thank you, he said. I accidentally locked myself in here this morning, and I've been waiting for someone to open the door. Myron swallowed his Tootsie Roll Pop, stick and all. Chapter 11. Voices. My name is Mr. Gorf, said the man who stepped out of the closet, and surprising it may seem, the children weren't afraid. It was his voice. His voice was full of comfort and wisdom, like an old leather chair in a dusty library. It doesn't matter what he said. It felt good just to listen to him. He was a handsome man with neatly combed brown hair and clean fingernails. He carried a brown briefcase. Nobody even noticed that his nose has 3 nostrils. Since I am going to be your teacher for the next few months, let me tell you a bit about myself. I was born in the Himalayan mountains in a town called Kathmandu. Kathmandu, said Terence. Cool. Everyone laughed. They weren't laughing at Terence. There was just something about the name of the city and the way Terence said it. Terence's voice was like a rusty drainpipe. Have you ever been married? Asked Allison. Allison's voice was like a cat walking across a piano. No, I'm a bachelor, said Mr. Gore. Allison smiled, greatly relieved. Well, that's enough about me, said Mr. Gore. How about some of you telling me about yourselves? My name is Max, said Mac before raising his hand. Mac's voice was like a freight train. I built the biggest snowman you ever saw. Man, it was huge. I had to stand on a ladder, put the hat on his head. It was a stovepipe hat, like Abraham Lincoln wore, but I didn't know why they called it that. We have a microwave oven. Have you ever put a bag of marshmallows in a microwave oven? Man, it's like... Mr. Gorth's nose flared. His right nostril flared to the right, his left nostril flared to the left. Then the hole in the middle seemed to get larger. Meg coughed. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Thank you, Max, said Mr. Gorf. Anyone else? Dee Dee raised her hand. Yes, young lady, said Mr. Gorf. Dee Dee giggled. She liked the way he said young lady. My name is Dee Dee, she said. Her voice was small but full of energy, like a Super Bowl. I like soccer and Ninja Turtles. My favorite... Mr. Gorf's nose flared. Dee Dee noticed her voice too. Who's next? Said Mr. Gorf. Yes, the girl in the polka dot shirt. My name's Mauricia, said Mauricia. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. Mauricia's voice was like a pineapple milkshake. Mr. Gorf sucked it up through his nose. Hey, what's going? Said Todd. Todd was silent. Look at his nose, shouted Eric Bacon. It has... Eric Bacon had nothing else to say. Anybody say anything? Jenny tried to warn. Her voice disappeared up Mr. Gorf's nose. Soon the class was quiet. Mr. Gorf's middle nostril had snorted all their voices. Except for Allison. She remained silent. She knew she'd only get 1 chance to speak, and she had to wait for the right moment. What good little boys and girls you are, said Mr. Gorf. so nice and quiet. He laughed. Of course, this isn't my real voice, he said. I stole this voice from a gentleman I met in Scotland. He touched the tip of his voice. This is my voice, he squawked. If a donkey could talk, and if the donkey had a sore throat, and if spoke with a French accent, that was what Mr. Gorf's voice sounded like. But when he said the next was even more horrible than his voice. Mrs. Gorf was my mommy. The children sat frozen in their chairs, too scared to move. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Mr. Gorf touched his nose. Who is it? He asked in the pleasant voice he stole from the Scottish gentleman. Miss Marsh, said Miss Marsh from the other side of the door. I just came up to say hello and welcome you to Wayside School. That's very nice of you, Miss Marsh, said Mr. Gorf. But we're very busy right now. Maybe we can get together for tea and crumpets sometime. Miss Marsh giggled. That sounds lovely, she said. By the way, Mr. Gorf, are you married? No, I'm single, said Mr. Gorf. So am I, said Miss Marsh. Miss Marsh, shouted Allison. Help! Mr. Gorf is taking... Mr. Gorf's nose flared. Did you say something, Allison? Asked Miss Marsh. Mr. Gorf touched his nose. Then he spoke, this time using Allison's voice. Mr. Gorf is taking us on a field trip next week, but he might need help. Do you want to come with us? Maybe, said Miss Marsh. Thank you, Allison. Oh, don't thank me, said Allison's voice. Thank Mr. Gorf. He's the best teacher in the whole world. I'm glad, said Miss Marsh. That sounds very charming. And so do you, said Mr. Gorf, speaking like the gentleman from Scotland. He touched his nose. See you later, Miss Marsh, said the voice of Eric Evans. Take care, said Calvin's voice. Have a nice day, said Kathy's voice. Chapter 12. Nose. Mr. Gorf locked the door. I don't want any more interruptions, he said. Very quietly, Leslie slipped a piece of paper out of her desk. Then she felt around for a pencil. Mr. Gorf returned to the teacher's desk. He opened the top drawer and took out the class list. It was the names of all children in the class, their parents' names, and the parents' home and work phone numbers. Let's play a game, he said, speaking in his own normal French donkey with a sore throat voice. The name of the game is Who Am I Now? Leslie found a pencil. She held the paper on her lap where Mr. Gorf couldn't see it and wrote Help in big letters. She had to get it to Louis, the yard teacher. Mr. Gorf touched the tip of his nose. Who am I now? He asked. It was a girl's voice, soft and warm, and just a little bit of giggle in it. Everyone looked at Rondi. Rondi, said Mr. Gorf. He opened his briefcase and removed the portable phone. He dialed Rondi's phone number. Hello, Mommy, said Mr. Gorf into the phone using Rondi's voice. No, nothing's wrong. I just called to say I hate you. You're the worst mommy in the whole world. You're ugly and you smell bad. It's not fair. Out of all the mommies in the world, I got stuck with you. He hung up the phone. Rondi sat crying in a chair. Mr. Gorf touched his nose. Isn't this a good game? He asked, sounding very much like a sick French donkey. Rondi is crying, and at home her mother is crying too. He laughed. Too bad you won't ever be able to tell her you're sorry, Rondi. Lassie carefully folded the piece of paper into a paper airplane. There was one open window next to Sherry's desk. Mr. Gorf touched his nose. Who am I now? He asked. Everyone tried not to look at Joe. Mr. Gorf called Joe's mother at work. Hello, Mommy, he said. I hate you. I wish you'd go away forever. Then maybe Daddy will marry somebody good this time. Leslie knew she'd only have one chance. It would take a perfect throw. She tossed the paper airplane toward the window. Mr. Gorf saw it. Hey! He shouted. The airplane sailed closer, but then at the last second it made a sudden turn, hit the wall, and landed on the floor. Mr. Gorf laughed. He picked up the airplane and unfolded it. Help! He sneered. No one can help you now. You took my mommy away from me, and I'm going to take your mommies away from you. He touched his nose. Who am I now? He asked. It was Leslie's voice. He started to dial her home phone number, but he was interrupted by a knock on the floor. Oh, Mr. Gorf, sang Miss Mush. Yes, said Mr. Gorf, still in Leslie's voice. He touched his nose and cleared his throat. I mean, yes? This time he sounded like a donkey with tonsillitis. He touched his nose again. Yes? He asked in the pleasant voice he took from the Scottish gentleman. It's me again, said Miss Mush. Miss Mush's voice was like two boots sloughing through mud. I begged you a pie, Mr. Gorf, to welcome you to Wayside School. Mr. Gorf sighed. You are very kind, Miss Mush, he said, but we're all quite busy at the moment. Perhaps another. It's best to eat it while it's still warm, said Miss Mush. You probably don't get fresh pies very often, being a bachelor and all. I really hate to disturb the class, said Mr. Gorf. I'll tell you what, I'll just come outside a moment and you can hand it to me. He glared at the class, stirring them to move. Then he opened the door. I hope you like pepper pie, said Miss Mush. She smashed it in his face. Mr. Gorf turned around. His face was covered with thick pepper cream. He sneezed. Calvin laughed. Hey, my voice is back, said Calvin. Wait a second. This isn't my voice. I sound like Bibi. Mr. Gorf sneezed again. I can talk, shouted Jenny. But who am I? Mr. Gorf sneezed. You're Maricia, said Jason. Jason sounded like the gentleman from Scotland. Mr. Gorf kept sneezing. Who might I be, Sonny? Paul cackled. He sounded like somebody's grandmother. Todd barked. Achoo! Mr. Gorf sneezed so hard his nose flew off his face. He screamed like a donkey, then ran noseless out of the room. Oh, gross, said Jason. Now I sound like Allison. Bibi says something in Italian. Nobody panic, said Miss Mush. Your voices are bouncing around, trying to find where they belong. It might take a while, but soon you'll get back to normal. How do you know? Asked Leslie, although she sounded like Paul. And how'd you know to smash a pepper pie in Mrs. Gorf's face? I wasn't exactly sure, explained Miss Mush, but when I came up the first time, I heard Kathy say, have a nice day. So either Kathy had decided to be nice to me, or Mr. Gorf was a mean teacher who sucked his children's voices up his nose. She shrugged. I just didn't think Kathy would be nice. Maybe if you learn to brush your teeth, muttered Kathy. Mr. Gorf's nose lay on the floor. Miss Mush picked it up and put it in her apron pocket. It will go good in spaghetti sauce, she said. Soon all the children had their real voices back. Rondi and Joe called their mothers on Mr. Gorf's portable phone and told them they loved them. While far away in a small village in Scotland, a man who hadn't spoken for 20 years turned to his wife and said, Top of the morning to you, Tilly.